Malbolge is the sixth layer of the 9 Hells of Baator, governed by the Archdevil Glasya. Known as the Tyranny of Turmoil, this layer serves as the prison of the 9 Hells, where devils who have violated the law endure years of excruciating punishment under the watchful eye of Asmodeus' daughter. The Crushing Lands, often simply referred to as the Crushing, is one of the harshest circles of hell, with its relentless avalanches making it undesirable even to the Btezu. Malbolge is characterized by an immense, seemingly endless slope, resembling the sides of an impossibly large mountain. Boulders and debris constantly tumble down in lethal and thunderous landslides, forcing inhabitants to seek refuge in vast caves carved into the mountainside or in decaying fortresses. In earlier times, there were numerous bronze fortresses, but these have gradually deteriorated. In more recent times, some areas in Malbolge are protected from rock slides by structures featuring projections that direct avalanches away from the sheltered spaces below. Other buildings stand on adamantine pillars embedded in the mountain, allowing them to endure the constant onslaught, although their platforms often sway. Cages holding condemned devils are typically suspended on chains beneath these platforms, ensuring they are struck by the avalanches, causing excruciating yet non-lethal injuries. Roofed trenches and tunnels connect different locations, though travel through them remains perilous. It is considered one of the most hazardous layers of hell and the most difficult to navigate. Its landscape resembles that of the plain of Gehenna in its challenging terrain, slowing movement even for experienced climbers, and more so for those without such skills. The entire layer is tilted, with inclines ranging from mild angles to extreme slopes. There are no natural flat surfaces, making rest and construction nearly impossible, and the risk of falling ever present, with high drops down to stone below. While most Btezu can teleport to avoid these dangers, most travelers cannot. Climbing Malbolge also involves navigating jagged boulders, either by avoiding them as they fall or climbing over them when stationary. Parts of the layer frequently break off and roll downhill, though the origin of these boulders remains unknown. They move seemingly at random, but in reality they follow a complex prearranged pattern beyond mortal comprehension. Among the smaller boulders are larger, more stable so-called islands of stone. However, even these are not anchored to the mountain, and any attempts to build on them eventually fail when the boulders shift, particularly during violent landslides. Occasionally, boulders settle long enough to form dark tunnels through the piles, but exploring these tunnels is risky, as the rocks could begin moving at any moment, crushing those inside. Sometimes the shifting boulders reveal passages into the underlying stone, though whether this is compacted granite or another large boulder remains uncertain. Beneath the relatively stable bedrock of Malbolge, rumors suggest the existence of underground cities, strongholds, and other ancient places. It does not have a ground layer, but is dominated by jagged obsidian shards known as the Knives. These towering monoliths lean against each other to form passages or jut out in massive sheets. While they appear stable, any attempt to walk on them quickly reveals their instability, with sudden shifts causing travelers to fall into razor-lined pits below, where they are sliced and cleaved. Above the sky is a boiling expanse of leprous colors, raining burning droplets onto those unfortunate enough to be below. No planar portals can directly connect to any layer of hell except the top layer of Vernus. As a result, reaching Malbolge generally requires traveling to the layer above it, Stygia, and finding a portal there, with a similar process needed to reach Maladomini below. Portals exist that connect that Stygian realm of Angkor Wat to at least one of Malbolge's bronze fortresses, and from another fortress in Balzabur's primary city of Malagard. The primary resident of Malbolge is Glasya, Hell's most notorious criminal and its highest-ranking warden. Her ability to hold both of these titles simultaneously demonstrates that in the infernal realms, crime can be rewarding as long as one avoids conviction. Unlike other archdevils, Glasya is not particularly concerned with matters outside the Hells, preferring to concentrate on the political dynamics of her own lair. Glasya's forces in Malbolge include the Creeping Cadre, a relatively young but formidable army specializing in weapons and magic that leave lasting effects. Their potent poisons, festering diseases, wands of enervation, and scrolls of energy drain are enough to unsettle even their field commander, General Furcus of the Dark Eight. Scattered across the harsh landscape are those disfigured by Glasya's wrath, left to dwell in the shadows. Despite the layer's unforgiving nature and Glasya's seemingly indifferent attitude, she has managed to surround herself with devils and other servants eager to carry out her commands. Her court is diverse, accommodating devils of all kinds, with special chambers in her palace, Osea, designed to suit the needs of each type. This variety is so extensive that even an ice devil can find a suitable environment within Glasya's domain. However, the changes that Malbolge has undergone throughout its history make it challenging to discern the current state of its infernal population. The known inhabitants of Malbolge include imps, barb devils, bone devils, and horn devils. Glasya is particularly close to Arimyes, whom she once commanded as queen, and Pylarions. These devils make up the nobility of her court and receive special favor. In contrast, although Lemurs and Neparibos have been found in her service before, even Glasya cannot stand their pitiful appearance or hear their wretched cries. War devils and brazen devils are reported to guard Glasya in her palace. Other devils that have served in Malbolge under her rule include Spinagons, Legion devils, Ambients, Chain devils, and Pain devils. Of particular note are Hellwasp devils, insect-like fiends that reside in the warmer regions of the Nine Hells. These creatures resemble large insects, featuring a tough exoskeleton and powerful legs equipped with natural, scimitar-shaped piercing weapons. Their wings are thin, with a metallic appearance, and they have a large stinger at the end of their abdomen. They are known in the Nine Hells for their vicious, hateful, and aggressive nature. Their exoskeleton is vulnerable to cold, and their metabolism depends on a warm environment to function, causing them to avoid extremely cold areas in the Nine Hells, such as Cania and Stygia. Hellwasps possess not only sharp talon-like feet, but also the ability to sting their victims, injecting a fiery poison with each successful attack. This venom burns like alchemist's fire, can slow or paralyze a creature for up to a minute, giving the Hellwasp time to carry the immobilized victim away to be consumed later. When colony guards are present, they swarm enemies, stinging them into paralysis so the larger devils can easily transport them. They live in colonies typically consisting of 10 to 20 adults, all of whom share responsibilities equally. They communicate through a unique form of telepathy. Some sages believe that a Hellwasp queen exists, and if she called upon them, all Hellwasps would serve her with unwavering loyalty. The colonies build nests that serve as communal protection, food storage, and nurseries for raising their young. The adults regurgitate a sticky bile containing fat, bone, and sand, which hardens into a light, strong, amber-colored material used for construction. These nests feature multiple chambers connected by winding tunnels, each dedicated to a specific function. One chamber contains octagonal cells for individual adults, while another central chamber serves as the hatchery where larvae are cared for. There's also typically a larder room where food, often living or dead victims, are stored. Hellwasp grubs are placed inside the bodies of victims, feeding on them as they develop. In Avernus, they have a preference for embedding the corpses of dead angels or other magically buoyant beings into the walls of their nests. When enough bodies are attached, the nest becomes buoyant, requiring it to be tethered to the ground to prevent it from floating away. The Hellwasps then make the underside of the nest the only entrance. Sages believe that Glasya was the one who brought Hellwasps to the Nine Hells from another lower plane. According to this theory, Hellwasps were originally a type of fiend, similar to mesodemons, that served a wasp-like demon lord. After Glasya defeated this demon lord in a blood war battle in the Abyss, the Hellwasps recognized her as the new queen and followed her back to the Nine Hells. She then transformed them into devils and allowed them to nest in her Garden of Delights. These Hellwasps serve Glasya loyally and would only obey others if she permits it. Glasya is known to address petitioners in the audience chamber of her palace, where various devils, mortal thralls, and damned souls that have captured her interest also gather. Her court includes reckless mortal couriers and damned noble figures or individuals of wit, though Glasya is fully capable of ending their lives if they cease to entertain her. Malbolge is also home to non-devils. The lair hosts one of the largest populations of succubi in the Nine Hells, alongside Dis and Stygia. Several night hags, Hellwasps, and Pylarions are also born on the lair, having developed from the tumor-like masses that once grew under the ribs of the former ruler, the Hag Countess. During its corrupted period, Malbolge became infested with infernal vermin, with monstrous insects such as giant spiders, centipedes, and wasps being particularly prevalent. Hellstinger scorpions and Hellwasps also plague the lair, although the larger and more intelligent of these creatures have learned to steer clear of the powerful devils that inhabit Malbolge. Rumors persist about ancient places beneath, said to harbor monstrous beings that existed long before the Baator. Ever since Malgard's reign, eerie laughs and cries have echoed from beneath the mountain. Some believe these sounds come from the ancient Baatorians, a race of infernal natives displaced by Asmodeus' arrival. Other legends speak of a forgotten citadel deep within the lair, where angels loyal to he who was, Asmodeus' original divine master, remain. These angels, driven mad and twisted over time, have become something entirely different from both angels and devils. Malbolge has seen many overlords come and go, with control of the lair shifting hands repeatedly throughout the ages. Like every hell, it takes on the traits of its ruling archdevil, leaving little of its original form intact after countless millennia of change. In ancient times, it was said to be a vast and beautiful garden, cherished by whatever deity once ruled over it. However, Asmodeus' rebellion and the ensuing war devastated the realm, leading to its ruin and reshaping. Eventually, it came under the control of Lucifer. The exact state of Malbolge during Lucifer's rule is unclear, but Asmodeus later seized the lair from him after Lucifer violated the infernal laws by secretly having a child. Following Lucifer's downfall, Asmodeus gifted Malbolge to Baldur, a fallen archon who quickly ascended the infernal hierarchy after he came to the Nine Hells, displacing a long-serving lord to become the Archduke of Maladomini. Baldur received Malbolge as a reward for some particularly vile service to Asmodeus. At the same time, he also rewarded another of his greatest warriors, Moloch, by granting him dominion over Malbolge. However, Moloch was not made an Archduke. Instead, he was appointed as a Grand Duke, a Lord of the Nine under the authority of one of his peers, a status that Baldur found acceptable. Moloch is a former Archdevil of the Nine Hells who served as Baldur's viceroy in Malbolge before being exiled after the Reckoning. Once the most formidable Duke of Hell, he was mistrusted by his masters and betrayed by his subjects in a cunning coup, leading the despised governor to scheme for his comeback. Moloch has a powerful, nearly square physique, with short, exceptionally thick arms that end in large, clawed hands and feet. His reddish-orange skin and bestial face are marked by a massive, horned head with fiery, slanted, unblinking eyes and a gaping mouth full of sharp, shark-like teeth. As a soldier, Moloch is a fearless adversary whose mere name instills terror in the Tanari hordes. Known for his relentless hatred of his enemies, his malice remains unsoftened by his rise to power or the suffering of his victims. He takes pleasure in torturing and disfiguring other devils with a cruelty that rivals Beelzebul's. Even after being overthrown, his ambition remains undiminished, and he is willing to use deceit and confusion to reclaim his power. He is a devil of immense physical power, capable of grabbing and crushing his enemies with his massive hands or tearing them apart with his hellfire-wreathed claws before delivering a vicious bite. He also possesses regenerative abilities, making him very difficult to permanently harm unless silver, good-aligned weapons, or radiant energy are used against him. When outnumbered, he can exhale a gas cloud that induces overwhelming despair and panic, causing those within it to drop their weapons and flee until he is out of sight. He has a wide array of spell-like abilities for both negotiation and combat, often employing tactics he learned from other demonic foes. Although lacking in wealth, He can use spells like Permanent Image or Major Image to create the illusion of riches and disguise himself, even appearing much smaller, with Alter Self. He can compel others to work for him with spells like Suggestion and manipulate minds using Confusion and Gias. He is believed to speak all known languages and uses magic to understand written words. Offensively, he wields many fire-based spell-like abilities, such as Pyrotechnics, Produce Flame, and also an enhanced version of Burning Hands. He can create walls of fire to trap his foes before attacking with a greater fire burst when they approach, as well as unleashing Flame Strike. He can use a symbol of Stunning and Blasphemy, typically reserving the unholy word for weaker opponents. Other sinister powers include the ability to fly, animate dead, greater teleport, detect magic, and cast Stinking Cloud. He can generate electric discharges, and even after his exile, he was known to be able to summon a small group of Pornogons. Technically, his realm of Malbolge was under the authority of Balzabul, the Archduke of Maladomini, during his tenure. Moloch held the title of Archduke only in the sense that he ruled a layer of hell, but he did so as Balzabul's representative. Asmodeus had granted Balzabul control over both planes, knowing that the two would be preoccupied with their own power struggles over the layer. This situation led to questions about why either of them desired the layer, given that under Moloch's rule it was a barren wasteland, a desolate expanse of broken black crags piled into a shifting heap, resembling the collapsed remains of enormous angular structures. The treacherous terrain was steep and unstable, or a misstep could lead to a fall into pits filled with sharp obsidian shards. Amid the chaos of this landscape, there were also vast caves, caverns, twisting tunnels, and sharp-cornered passages, created by the plane's nature as a massive mound of debris. The wreckage contained volcanically active pits filled with fire, resting atop an infinite sea of bubbling lava that emitted smoke and clouds of toxic green-gray gases. The sky was dominated by blood-red steam clouds, and the air above was thick with the stench of burning, making it hot and suffocating. Although the ground was the only barrier protecting travelers from the magma below, it was scorching hot, capable of igniting anything flammable that remained in contact with it for more than a few moments. During Moloch's reign, he had no permanent residence, as Balzabul mandated constant movement to prevent him from resting undisturbed. Instead, Moloch resided within the great copper fortresses scattered across the layer. There were at least 13 grand citadels of bronze in the realm, each serving as a place where Moloch could imprison his captives and indulge in various forms of wickedness. One fortress contained vats of molten gold, which Moloch would immerse his victims in before placing them in niches, creating a gruesome gallery of preserved agony with hundreds of pained expressions for him to later admire. However, most of these citadels were plundered and ruined during the Reckoning and suffered further degradation with the rise of the other lords of the Sixth. Under Malagard's rule, the remaining structures fell into disrepair, with constant rocky avalanches weakening the bronze and surprise inspections resulting in the deaths of the inhabitants and the razing of strongholds. By the time Glasya took control, only one fortress, the half-melted, gold-dripping facility known as Slag, remained standing as a testament to what she had overcome. Future denizens of Malbolge were left to dwell in the decaying remnants of Moloch's once formidable domain. Despite his power, Moloch's authority was not well regarded in the Nine Hells. During his rule, it was a cacophonous realm, filled with the constant movement of armies, hellhounds, and devils, particularly lemurs, Pornogons, although Spinagons, Ocelus, and Amnesus were also occasionally present. Horned devils patrolled the realm in pairs, and intruders were always brought before the highest available authority figure, sometimes even Balzabul himself during his visits, for torture and interrogation. Few escaped, and even fewer survived for long. If the Pornogons failed in their duties, they often faced torment in place of the intruders, fueling a deep-seated resentment among Moloch's servants. The combined cruelty of Balzabul and Moloch was so intense that around half of the lesser devils in the lair were maimed or disabled in some way, and it was believed that the majority would support a rebellion if it was deemed likely to succeed. Stripped of his title, deprived of power, and robbed of most of his possessions, Moloch has repeatedly failed to reclaim his throne, yet he continues to spend his time scheming to regain his lost power. He was eventually cursed so that upon entering Hell, he would be demoted to an imp, only returning to his normal form after leaving. As a result, he is occasionally found plotting in his home plane and otherwise roams the planes, searching for a magical means to restore his former glory. It is said that he is attempting to rebuild an army by recruiting Yugoloths and Sigil. Although being destitute, he offers mortals knowledge of the multiverse in exchange for material wealth, a resource he needs in vast quantities to negotiate with the demons and carry out his plans. Moloch had few allies among the Archdevils even when in power, and was surrounded by rivals in the neighboring hells and beyond. Above him was Geryon, the Lord of Stygia, who despised Moloch intensely, a sentiment the Grand Duke shared. If not for Beelzebul's protection, the two would likely have waged an open war, with Moloch probably on the losing side. Beelzebul himself had little trust in the Viceroy, and constantly tried to keep him occupied, while Moloch schemed to gain complete power over Malbolge. Further afield, Belial, the Lord of Phlegethos, harbored nearly as much hatred for Moloch as Geryon did, despite being an ally of Beelzebul. Mephistopheles, the Lord of Cania, would have been pleased to see Geryon destroy Beelzebul's duke. Asmodeus had promoted Moloch primarily because he knew the cunning schemer would help keep the other devils in check. However, when Moloch mocked the Lord of Nessus after being decisively defeated in the Reckoning, Asmodeus exiled him in anger. Moloch also bears resentment towards Asmodeus' daughter Glasya, viewing her rise as the new Archduchess of Malbolge as blatant favoritism by his former master. Moloch's status as a despised Archdevil extends beyond his minions and peers. Even his own dukes harbor resentment towards him. Most of these so-called dukes were actually servants loaned to him by Beelzebul, primarily to keep him in check. Among them was Bileth, a tribune who acted as Beelzebul's Justicar, ensuring that Moloch adhered to orders. The orders were delivered by Beelzebul's herald, Neabaz. While Moloch couldn't directly defy Bileth, he attempted to undermine him by spreading rumors about his mental state. The defense of the lair was left to the pit fiends Bethage and Harabal, with Bethage leading 9 companies of Pornugons and Harabal commanding 16 companies of Oceluths. Moloch also had Tartak, cruel deputy, and Lilith, a seductive devil assigned as his chosen consort. The knight had Malagard and Beleth, the prince of imps, who served as his spy master, although likely because Beleth had already infiltrated Moloch's court. Although Moloch once had a base of worshippers who displayed fanatical loyalty, this support crumbled after his defeat. Many of his followers fled to serve other archdevils during his prolonged absence, leaving behind only small fractured cults, whose members no longer could cast powerful spells. Despite this, a few statues glorifying Moloch, imbued with faint remnants of his power, still exist deep in ancient dungeons. These statues occasionally attract new monstrous followers, although their crystal eyes also draw the attention of treasure-seeking adventurers. Malbolge was granted to Moloch and Beelzebul eons ago, after it had previously been ruled by an archdevil named Beherit, who was obliterated for violating rules on devilish promotion. Moloch received control of Malbolge as a reward for being Hell's mightiest warrior, a constant servant who played a significant role in driving the endless demonic hordes out of the 9 hells. This supposedly occurred during a time when Asmodeus led the Dark Angels against the Abyss. As the Archdevils began to align themselves in a massive war to determine who would challenge Asmodeus for control of Hell, Moloch was persuaded to join the conflict by the cunning night hag Malagard. While bathing in a pool of putrescent pus in one of his domains, surrounded by the sounds of tormented screams and being coated in grease from the fiery tombs of blasphemers and heretics by his consort, Moloch was seduced by Malagard and convinced to take action. She urged him to support Beelzebul in taking down Mephistopheles and then eventually Asmodeus, suggesting that once they were defeated, Moloch could seize the throne and become the king of Hell himself. Given Moloch's nature, he needed little persuasion to embrace his new role with enthusiasm. Unbeknownst to Moloch, he was on the verge of experiencing one of the greatest betrayals in the history of Baator, as his treacherous lover Malagard had secretly been conspiring against him. Malagard had been unfaithful, aligning herself with Moloch's arch-nemesis Geryon, believing that the wild beast's greater status could elevate her own position. The advice she gave Moloch to join the war was delivered at Geryon's request, and she orchestrated the betrayal of Moloch's mistreated forces at the war's climax. Malagard was also in league with Glasya, who was plotting to ignite the reckoning. Malagard fed Moloch false information, convincing him that Mephistopheles was planning an invasion, thereby setting a self-fulfilling prophecy into motion. The other members of Moloch's court proved to be no more loyal. Beleth, who had gradually risen in power after being accepted into Moloch's court, became frustrated when Moloch refused to grant him further authority. Moloch's attempts to prevent him from spying on him backfired, leading Beleth to assist Malagard by using his imp spies to provide her with crucial information. Balzabal's subjects were equally ineffective in thwarting the schemes brewing within Moloch's ranks. Lilith, who had felt powerless under Moloch's rule, was frequently moved between fortresses at Balzabal's whim, who chose not to actively participate in the rebellion. Instead, she allowed Malagard to succeed by simply not intervening to curb her influence. Artak, however, was far more deliberate in Moloch's downfall. Having been resentfully assigned to Moloch after his initial fall, Artak was willing to support, or at least not oppose, any plot by another Archdevil to depose Moloch. Not only did he refrain from stopping Malagard, he fully joined in the conspiracy against Moloch, betraying him alongside the others. After the Archdevils were defeated, Geryon persuaded Malagard to give Moloch yet another disastrous piece of advice: to stand defiant against Asmodeus, even in the face of defeat. Foolishly, Moloch followed Malagard's suggestion, convinced that by showing unwavering resolve, the Lord of Nessus would respect his strength. This defiance led Moloch to practically spit in Asmodeus' face, resulting in his prompt and angry disownment by the ruler of Hell. Despite Geryon's total loyalty, he too was abandoned, and Malagard was elevated to the position of Hag Countess in Moloch's place. As her first act, Malagard exiled Moloch to the material plane, a place he loathed in fiery expulsion. It was said that he was supposed to have been killed, but he narrowly escaped by quickly using a planar portal. Moloch spent the next few centuries amassing a massive army of monsters, mortal followers, and sympathetic devil soldiers, intending to gather a force strong enough to utterly destroy the Hag Countess. However, when he left his legions to make final preparations while he sought out a powerful artifact to secure his victory, he became trapped when the item he planned to use for his re-entry into Hell, the Stone of Corbenet, was stolen from him. Without their leader, his forces were crushed by Malagard, and Moloch failed once more. Even though Malagard eventually fell, much to Moloch's satisfaction, Glasya rose in his place, and it is rumored that Moloch was captured and tortured within Slag at some point. Eventually, he managed to work his way back to Baator through a series of vile acts and dark bargains, but he found himself unable to leave, becoming one of the notable outcast dukes of Avernus, known as the Rabble of Devilkin. From there, he led a group of subversive exiles, plotting to build a new army, take vengeance, and conquer all of Hell. However, his schemes seemed to bear little fruit, and after his latest failure, he is politically, monetarily, and physically isolated. Despite this, he remains determined to reclaim his status, whether by getting back into Asmodeus' favor or by dealing with demons to retake Malbolge by force. Under Moloch's rule, with Balzabal's influence looming over him, Malbolge shared many geographical similarities with Maladomini, although Maladomini was flat, while Malbolge was rugged and treacherous. The plain was a craggy, ashen wasteland of black, broken rock, resembling a vast pile of collapsed city-sized building blocks. This chaotic landscape formed a network of enormous passages and twisting angular spaces beneath the surface, but even in this form, Malbolge was highly unstable. The steep, shifting terrain often led to missteps, ending in pits filled with sharp obsidian shards. Malbolge was volcanically active, with fire pits and caverns that yielded a wealth of rubies, sapphires, and diamonds, making unmined gems a common sight across its tortured surface. While Arjale and Tantalhor could be found there, they are less abundant than in Phlegethos. The sky was a seething mass of blood-red steam, and the air was hot, suffocating, and filled with the stench of burning as Malbolge floated atop a sea of lava that released deadly clouds of noxious green-gray gas. During this period, it was a noisy and torturous place, populated by suffering lemurs, Niboribos, horned devils, and occasionally spine devils, Bone Devils, and Styx Devils. These inhabitants endured the relentless torment and disfigurement inflicted not only by Moloch, their cruel ruler, but also by Baldur during his visits. Nuparibos and Spinagons were tasked with haphazardly mining the lair under the command of Cornigons, whose rank and status were determined by their yields of gems and ores. This led to fierce rivalries among the Cornigons, involving deception, theft, and even outright battles to see who could bring in the largest yield to the authorities. Besides overseeing mining, the Cornigons patrolled Malbolge in pairs, capturing intruders alive for torment and interrogation, as failing to do so would mean suffering in their place. Many of these captives were killed in the service of Baldur, who was obsessed with hoarding all information. Valuables and captives alike were transported to the bronze, copper-clad citadels scattered across Malbolge. These fortresses, although technically the homes of Moloch, were in practice controlled by the Cornigons. Each of the 13 great strongholds was dedicated to a different form of cruelty, where the Grand Duke indulged in his vices. However, Moloch could not freely occupy these fortresses. Although he was the Lord of Malbolge in title, he constantly was moved between his homes on the orders of Baldur, in decrees conveyed by his frequently bribed herald, Neabaz. Baldur feared that allowing Moloch to stay in one place for too long might enable him to consolidate his power, so he repeatedly disturbed Moloch's routines and infiltrated his court with his own agents. In an attempt to manipulate Moloch, Baldur gifted him the Archdevil Lilith as a consort, hoping to use her talents for distraction disadvantage. Artak was sent to act as a deputy and ambassador to vassal dukes and visitors, while Bileth was installed as tribune, serving as a watchful presence against Moloch and others who might attempt to seize control of the lair. Baldur's marshal, Barbatos, was responsible for administering Malbolge's defensive forces, which included 9 companies of Cornigons under the command of the pit fiend Bethage, and 16 companies of Bone Devils, led by the pit fiend Harabal. Asmodeus' strategy of pitting Moloch and Baldur against each other was successful for eons, even though to an outsider it might seem puzzling why either of them would want control over Malbolge in its current state. Moloch was driven by ambition and kept the other archdevils in check, while Baldur struggled to maintain control over Malbolge and Maldomini at the same time. Although those under Moloch were technically loyal to Baldur, every Duke of Malbolge, including Moloch, secretly hoarded a few gems to sell on the side, and many were discontent with the existing regime. Thus, Asmodeus' carefully constructed arrangement began to show signs of unraveling. The situation deteriorated when Moloch took the dread night hag Malagard as his advisor and second consort, a move that was entirely acceptable given his status. However, this decision set in motion one of the most significant betrayals in the 9 Hells. Glasya, as part of her own schemes to overthrow her father, played a crucial role in instigating a revolt against him. As part of her plan, she traveled to Malbolge to recruit Moloch's mistress, Malagard, to her cause. Unbeknownst to Moloch, Malagard was already betraying him. She was secretly involved with his longtime rival Geryon, who promised her a higher station in exchange for her loyalty. Malagard, under Geryon's influence, gradually seduced Moloch and goaded him into greater independence with her insidious promises. Beleth, who served as Moloch's spy master, partly because Moloch suspected he had already infiltrated his court, became aware of Malagard's own ambitions through his network of informants. Recognizing an opportunity, he allied with her, using his intelligence and her influence to incite Moloch, along with other archdukes and dukes, to rise up against Asmodeus during the reckoning. Artak, seeking a chance to further his own ambitions, joined the conspiracy, skillfully manipulating events to set Moloch up for a fall, all while planning to betray both Malagard and Geryon in the end. Lilith, though not an active participant in the conspiracy, allowed it to unfold by doing nothing to stop it, having grown resentful of her masters and lacking motivation to expose Malagard's deceit. As expected by some of the conspirators, including Malagard and Beleth, Asmodeus ultimately thwarted the Archduke's plot to overthrow him. His agent Geryon sounded his horn, and the pit fiend commanders leading the Archduke's armies turned on their lords, siding with Asmodeus. Malagard had orchestrated the betrayal of Moloch's armies, ensuring their loyalty to Asmodeus in the crucial moment. The exact punishment of Moloch remains unclear. Some accounts suggest that he was sentenced to death, escaping only by using a planar portal in the last moment. Other versions claim he was officially exiled and banished to the prime material plane. In some tales, it is Asmodeus who dealt Moloch's punishment, while in others, it is the new ruler of Malbolge, Malagard, who was chosen by Asmodeus for the role. For his involvement in the reckoning, Baldur was removed from his position as Malbolge's overlord and cursed repeatedly, leaving Malagard as the undisputed mistress of Malbolge. Many devils resented Asmodeus' decision, believing themselves far more suited to the task than a non-devil like Malagard, but the choice was Asmodeus' alone. Thus began the reign of Malagard over Malbolge. When she ascended to the role of Archduke, she gained full dominion over the layer's physical aspects, allowing her to trigger avalanches at will, often directly under the feet of her enemies. Within Malbolge, she was nearly invincible. She reshaped the plane into a more mountainous form, causing the lava beneath the surface to cool, crack, and become still. The gases that once bubbled up from the lava gathered overhead to form a solid firmament. The Hag Countess had an appearance of a stooped, tall crone, with her withered and hunched form showing the toll of time. Her warty skin looked severely bruised and was covered in boils, blisters, and open sores. What set her apart from other night hags were her tattered, feathered wings on her back, resembling those of a fallen angel. Her appearance was particularly grotesque, with eyes that glowed a fiery red, breath that reeked of rotten meat, and coarse, gray hair in contrast to the typical black hair of a normal night hag. Although she was lawful evil, she was more aloof and unpredictable compared to her more controlling peers. Despite this, she was just as corrupt as some of the other archdevils, known for being incredibly deceitful and scheming. She did not tolerate disrespect or foolishness from others, although she was not completely unreasonable. Physically, she was possibly the weakest of all the archdevils, having secured her position through cunning rather than hard work. Unlike typical night hags, she lacked a heartstone to cure disease or become ethereal. However, her frail appearance was misleading. She possessed alarming strength, swift reflexes, and moved with unnatural speed. Having spent a considerable amount of time in Hell, the Hag Countess expanded her repertoire of spell-like abilities by delving into forbidden knowledge. She gained powerful offensive spells like Fireball, long-lasting spells such as Animate Dead and Insanity, and enhanced her polymorphing abilities beyond those of ordinary night hags. She retained the plague-ridden bite of a night hag, and like other archdevils, could summon Batazu to her aid, such as lemurs and pit fiends. She was highly skilled with her enchanted greatsword, a magical weapon she relied on in combat. The sword was remarkably light in her hands, but could cause severe harm to anyone else who attempted to hold it. Its power grew when soaked in blood, and when the Countess was consumed by rage, the blade would ignite into flames. Along with the vast legions of devils and hellhounds that roamed Malbolge, it was a rocky domain entirely composed of slopes, plagued by constant avalanches due to the relentless rolling of the massive boulders. The only structures that endured these conditions were the Hag Countess's copper fortresses. These fortresses varied in size, from small strongholds to grand citadels commanded by pit fiends, all of which had to withstand the continuous rockfalls, creating a deafening clamor and requiring vigilant maintenance to prevent structural failures. Unlike the relatively stable locations of the fortresses, the Hag Countess's personal keep was situated inside a boulder the size of a mountain, which perpetually rolled down the slopes of the layer in an unpredictable manner. This fortress was not the seat of her court, but served as stables for nightmares, housed numerous Annis hags, green hags, and Medusas, and was home to one of the finest and most expensive soul markets in Baator. Malagard was a cunning trickster who delighted in luring beings, whether mortal or otherwise, to Malbolge, only to have them crushed by the layer's rolling boulders. Unlike other lords, she did not centralize her nobles within her personal domain. Instead, they resided in the copper fortresses scattered across the layer. One of her preferred activities was to disguise herself and make unannounced visits to these fortresses to inspect them and test their guardians. She enforced a strict policy of questions first, torture later, and would not tolerate rudeness or mindless brutality. She would destroy the fortresses of anyone who greeted her with disrespect or violence, or who failed to maintain their fortress properly. The Hag Countess had little interest in the political machinations of the Batazu, or in trying to overthrow Asmodeus, leaving such pursuits to others like Baldur and Mephistopheles. Instead, Malagard aimed even higher, seeking to ascend to godhood. However, her research into divinity on the astral plane had not yielded any useful insights. Until she could achieve this goal, the Countess focused on securing her position within the Nine Hells. Asmodeus appeared to have no long-term plans for the Hag Countess, and having witnessed his immense power, Malagard preferred to avoid drawing his attention. Being the only Archdevil who wasn't truly a devil, she feared that her fellow Archdevils might unite against her to remove her from power. Malagard regarded lesser Night Hags as her sisters, and like them, used nightmares as her mounts, with her favorite being a particularly formidable one named Bloodcurdle. She traveled between the Copper Fortresses accompanied by her tribune, a pit fiend named Billeth, and employed the Prince of Imps, Beleth, as her spy master. Despite her power, the new form of Malbolge was not suitable for the construction of cities. As a result, Malagard continued to use the Copper Fortresses left from the previous administration. However, the wars that ravaged the Hells had left many of these fortresses sacked and ruined. They required rebuilding and redesigning to channel and deflect the frequent rock flows. Even after these modifications, the fortresses struggled to withstand the more intense avalanches, and none could endure the worst of them. The fortresses were typically located in the plain's more stable regions, often sheltered behind the so-called islands of stone, but even there, boulders would constantly crash into the walls, creating relentless and terrible clanging noise. Instead of holding court in the traditional manner, she preferred to travel between the various fortresses as needed. Her nobles were scattered across these strongholds, so she made periodic visits. If Malagard were to knowingly or unknowingly be disrespected or outright attacked by a resident of a fortress, she would respond with devastating force, laying waste to the offending citadel and razing the fortress along with everyone inside. Similar fate awaited those who failed to maintain vigilance over the structural integrity of the bronze fortresses, as Malagard would arrive with her flaming sword to correct their mistakes. Such incidents occurred more than once, and over time, whether due to her own negligence or misdirected efforts, Malagard allowed the remaining strongholds to fall into disrepair. During her reign, Malbolge's resident devils included Spine Devils, Bearded Devils, and Ice Devils, with the rare Pit Fiends serving as commanders of the Copper Fortresses. Moloch had left behind a vast army of devils and hellhounds that continuously roamed the lair, and there was also a notable presence of fire giants during her rule. However, when it came to dukes, Malagard's regime was somewhat lacking in strength and influence. After Moloch's fall, Lilith and Bethage returned to Baalzebul's court, while the fate of Harabal remained unclear. Some speculated that he might have gone to tempt mortals on the Prime Material. Anyone who had remained loyal to Moloch was either banished or destroyed. Reports varied regarding Billeth and Tartak. Some suggested that they returned to Baalzebul, while others claimed they stayed with Malagard, or perhaps even managed to do both. In Tartak's case, even if he stayed with the Hag Countess, he was even less loyal to her than he had been to Moloch. Malagard, recognizing the precariousness of her position as the only non-devil, was eager to keep the spymaster Beleth on her side, fearing that the other powers in the Nine Hells might unite against her. Despite her efforts, no unique devils were elevated to the rank of Duke during her reign. Moloch, after his banishment, wasted no time in preparing his return to power. He spent centuries amassing an army of devils, monsters, and mortal followers, all with the aim of reclaiming Malbolge. His efforts nearly culminated in success, and it seemed that he was on the brink of launching a successful invasion. However, during the final stages of his preparations, Moloch ventured to a world on the material plane in search of an artifact that would guarantee his victory. This artifact, the Stone of Corbinet, was crucial for his re-entry into the Nine Hells. Unfortunately for Moloch, the Stone of Corbinet was stolen from him, leaving him stranded on the material plane, a place he loathed even before his banishment there. With Moloch trapped and unable to return, his once formidable armies were left leaderless on the eve of what could have been his triumph. Malagard, seizing the opportunity, swiftly crushed the now disorganized and leaderless forces with her superior might, ensuring that Moloch's bid to retake Malbolge ended in failure. Malagard, having witnessed the immense power of Asmodeus firsthand, generally avoided getting entangled in infernal politics, leaving the intrigues to figures like Baalzebul and Mephistopheles. However, this did not mean she lacked ambition. On the contrary, her hunger for power in the Nine Hells became increasingly troubling to the other Lords of the Nine. Unlike most Archdevils, she pursued a path to godhood. She understood that Archdevils were not true deities, so she dedicated herself to finding a way to ascend to true divinity. This pursuit led her to investigate the god corpses on the astral plane, hoping to unlock the secrets of their divine essence. She spent years gathering souls for a ritual that she believed would finally allow her to achieve Apotheosis. However, before she could see her plan come to fruition, something went terribly wrong. Some accounts suggest that Malagard lost favor with Asmodeus, who struck her down in a sudden fit of anger. Other versions claim that Glasya was responsible for Malagard's death, viewing it as a victory over her rival. There are also theories that the exiled Geryon interfered with her plans in some way. In yet another version, the ritual itself was unwise, poorly conceived, or abandoned, leading to Malagard's bizarre and untimely demise. Whatever the truth may be, the outcome was unmistakable. One morning, the Countess experienced violent convulsions, lapsing onto one of Malbolge's slopes while screaming in unbearable pain. As the ground trembled, Malagard began to grotesquely merge with the very terrain she once controlled. Her body transformed into the landscape itself. Her hair became forests, teeming with giant lice and other colossal vermin. Her skull morphed into a massive fortress, and her teeth turned into deposits of ivory ore. Her fingers were reshaped into ivory towers, and her ribs became bizarre mountains encircling Malbolge. Her internal organs ruptured into lakes and twisted into an intricate tunnel system resembling intestines. When the land finally settled and the remaining survivors of the catastrophe emerged, the echoes of her death cries ceased. Glasya, the daughter of Asmodeus, ascended from the depths of hell on a litter carried by imps, declaring herself the rightful ruler of Malbolge. Axacrusis, a Pylarion who had served as the Countess's chancellor, questioned Glasya's claim and was forced to eviscerate themselves. Their undying form fed to the imps. The loyal followers of the Countess who attempted to avenge her were captured and tortured in the towers formed from Malagard's fingers. Among them was the nightmare Bloodcurdle, who was imprisoned after hurling Glasya into a lake of bile. Those who submitted to Glasya, such as the Prince of Imps, found themselves absorbed into her inner circle. The reason that Asmodeus chose to elevate his daughter remains unclear, although many believe it was part of a long-planned scheme. Some speculate that Malagard was never meant to be anything more than a temporary placeholder, a figurehead to maintain control of the lair until Asmodeus and Glasya resolved their differences and she was ready to assume her role. This theory suggests Asmodeus had always intended for Glasya to rule Malbolge, which might explain why he demoted the loyal Geryon and tolerated the disruptive behavior of Lepistus. By doing so, he could mask his true intentions regarding Glasya and redirect the power that would have gone to Lepistus to her instead. Alternatively, some believe that Asmodeus' decision to give Malbolge to Glasya is a form of punishment. Glasya had long caused problems for her father, undermining him and even establishing Hell's first crime syndicate, exploiting legal loopholes to commit fraud. Rather than punishing her for breaking the law, Asmodeus might have disciplined her by making her an archdevil, ironically turning her into a prisoner for her own power. By saddling her with the responsibility of ruling a layer of hell, he could keep her ambitions in check, forcing her to collect souls through legal means as both a punishment and a burden. Whether her rise to power in Malbolge was part of a masterful scheme or a complete accident remains uncertain, but it marked a new era in the Nine Hells, with Glasya as a new ruler of the twisted landscape that had once been Malagard. Regardless of who initiated it, both Glasya and Asmodeus quickly moved to capitalize on the power vacuum that emerged in the hierarchy of the Hells. Seizing on the opportunity, she gathered her forces and abandoned her previous scheme to steal Maladomini. No other archdevil dared to contest Glasya's rule despite their animosity towards her. Since the Reckoning, their personal legions had been significantly weakened, and none were willing to risk a second reckoning just to claim Malbolge. Moreover, any attack on Glasya could be interpreted as an assault on Asmodeus himself, potentially invoking the full wrath, King of the Nine Hells. While Asmodeus' exact intentions for his daughter remain unclear, one thing is certain: Malbolge is now hers. Glasya appears normally as a tall, black-haired figure resembling a succubus. She possesses a striking, well-built physique and an otherworldly beauty, which is only accentuated by the small horns, large leathery wings, and forked tail that reveal her diabolical origins. Her skin has a coppery tone with a distinctive metallic sheen. She adorns herself with jewels, luxurious clothing, and other items of extraordinary value. She is known as one of the most unpredictable of the Archdevils. with a reputation for capricious behavior and a history filled with whimsy and mischief. She revels in her nonconformity, openly defying Hell's norms whenever it suits her, breaking tradition and bending rules to her will. Surprising others with her unexpected schemes brings her great joy, and even before she rose to the rank of Archdevil, she was somewhat rebellious, moving between courts as her whims dictated. Despite her often contrarian actions, Glasya is as cruel as any other diabolical figure in Hell. Her style of torment often involves verbal cruelty, takes great pleasure in informing those she lures into Hell of their impending doom, vividly describing the horrors awaiting them. Articulate and sharp-tongued, she combines subtle mockery, verbal games, cruel teasing, and aristocratic snobbery to toy with those at her mercy before eventually sending them off to be tortured once she grows bored. Her sadism extends to physical torment, finding great satisfaction in watching her victims suffer from dreadful diseases. Her ascent to lordship only increased the openness with which she indulges in her twisted desires. Glasya's sense of aesthetics contrasts sharply with her inner corruption. The Princess of Hell is a mixture of beauty and horror. She has a disturbing love for beauty, often sparing those she finds appealing, and refraining from killing captured servants of good who seem susceptible to her seduction. In contrast, she has no tolerance for the hideous appearances or pitiful cries of the lemurs. She transformed the corpse of the Hag Countess into a domain of striking palaces and gardens built on a foundation of decay and ugliness. Some of her victims are made enthrallingly beautiful, while others are turned into suffering parodies of life. Much like her realm, Glasya's enchanting exterior conceals a truly rotten core. Similar to her cruelty, Glasya's talent for devising sinister plots is inherited from her father. Her ambition is undeterred by her familial ties, and much like Hell's own criminal mastermind, she has no qualms about crossing any boundary in her pursuit of power. A master manipulator, she possesses the cunning and deceit necessary to navigate the treacherous environment of Hell. Her continued survival is largely due to her skill in deflecting suspicion and insulating herself from blame, often by making her allies take the fall for her actions. Despite her often detached demeanor, her followers are frequently willing to sacrifice themselves for her, as Glasya has a knack for evoking sympathy even from those who oppose her. She skillfully uses seduction, deception, and even sometimes honesty to rally others to her cause. She prefers to engage in dialogue rather than direct confrontation, aiming to make allies rather than enemies, and she is quick to persuade her attackers of their misguided actions. Simply being near Glasya is perilous, as she radiates an intoxicating aura that leaves those around her weakened, disoriented. In this vulnerable state, a mere glance of displeasure from Glasya can render a victim unconscious, or sometimes even cause death. Beyond her physical appearance, Glasya has the power to instill fear through her words alone, driving enemies into panic with vivid descriptions of torments they will soon face. Her array of manipulative abilities includes charm, domination, holding spells, shape-shifting, and the creation of complex illusions. Glasya rarely engages in direct combat, preferring to teleport away from danger and avoid large groups. When she does choose to fight, she uses her mental powers to control particularly dangerous foes while strategically positioning herself. She can teleport herself and her thralls across the battlefield, and often begins by summoning more reinforcements. Glasya lures her enemies with promises of pleasure or draining them with a touch that saps their body, mind, and soul. Her caress steals her victims' willpower and better judgment, converting it into life force for herself, while also inflicting a wasting disease that causes the flesh to decay from their bones. She can unleash a finger of death and infect her victims with a venomous bite that requires immediate neutralization, healing, or delay to prevent further harm. Like all Archdevils, she possesses the ability to regenerate herself over time, but her regenerative powers are unique in that they continue even after her death. This unusual trait may be linked to her connection with her father, suggesting a closer tie to godhood than other Archdevils. Her abilities in both combat and magic are said to have been greatly enhanced following her ascension to Lord of the Sixth, with some rumors claiming that she has stolen part of her power from the Hag Countess. However, despite these enhancements, she is still considered one of the weaker Archdevils. Within Malbolge, a few white cities can now be found, but the center of Glasya's power is Oseia, a dome-like palace fortress with gleaming white walls crafted from the inflated skull of the Hag Countess. This hollowed, 5-story structure is partially made from her varnished bones and other victims who have displeased Glasya. The palace is lavishly decorated in Baroque style, filled with ominous music echoing through its long corridors and adorned with unsettling, provocative statues. The hag's eye sockets have been transformed into oval, red glass windows capable of emitting fiery blasts, through which Glasya can be seen entertaining her guests. At the heart of Osea lies the Garden of Delights, breathtaking sanctuary with plants from across the multiverse. Unlike the artificial beauty found elsewhere in Malbolge, this pristine garden offers a genuine refuge from the horror and pain. No monsters lurk here, and the vibrant flowers dispel fear. However, this place is a cruel mockery, as guests who are lulled into a false sense of peace are soon returned to their torturous routines. The garden exists only to taunt them with a false hope. Surrounding Osea are 10 ivory towers, once the fingers of the Hag Countess, each divided into 3 bone-segmented stories. The lowest of these is known as the Tower of Pain, where Glasya's most dangerous enemies are tormented for eons. The higher one ascends, the more excruciating the torture becomes. The lower levels reserved for minor foes like adventurers, and the upper levels for survivors of Malagard's inner circle. The other towers serve as guard posts and roosts for Erennies. Though Glasya's decaying domain covers much of Malbolge, it is just that, a cover. Along the edges of the realm, remnants of Malbolge's former surface emerge, with seemingly stable but ever-shifting monoliths of jagged obsidian. Beneath the rotten soil of the sixth hell lie boulders and crags, ready to slice and dismember anyone who falls into these treacherous places. Even the very rock of Glasya's crumbling domain is deteriorating, hinting that Malbolge's decayed state is not permanent. The residents of Malbolge, who don't dwell in the crumbling forts or the cities, are forced to live in caves carved into the mountainside, traveling through tunnels and roof trenches to avoid being crushed by the frequent rock slides. Devils found guilty at trial are sentenced to Malbolge for years, sometimes confined in cages lowered to the level of the adamantine pillars on which the swaying structures are built. When the rock slides strike, those above remain unharmed, while the prisoners below are battered by the rocks, though never fatally. Glasya's citadel in this rocky realm is a stronghold supported by cracked pillars and buttresses that appear ready to collapse, but somehow mysteriously remain firm. Beyond this fortress lies a labyrinth filled with holding and torture cells for those who have displeased her. Unlike most Archdevils, Glasya shows little interest in matters beyond the 9 Hells, though her relentless schemes expand her influence and reach beyond her own plane. She concentrates her efforts on political maneuvering within Baator, where she is considered one of the most skilled manipulators of the Archdevils. As the Warden of Malbolge, the prison system of the 9 Hells, part of her duties involves overseeing the punishment of devils who break the laws. She spends much of her time enjoying the more beautiful parts of her domain or indulging in luxury. Yet with her new responsibilities as Archduchess, she can no longer engage in her previous pastime of personally seducing mortals into hell. Instead, she relives those experiences indirectly by instructing her favorite Erennies to tempt chosen targets, particularly self-righteous paladins and corruptible elder priests. Captives who pose no significant threat to her are tortured in her palace, where she can observe or participate whenever she desires. She is widely believed to be Asmodeus' only child, and the details surrounding her birth remain a mystery. It is unusual for beings of godlike power to share their abilities with offspring, making divine children exceptionally rare, and Asmodeus' plans for his daughter are unclear. Nonetheless, Glasya is not above using her familial connection to him as a protective shield against retaliation. She has even managed to secure the loyalty of some members of the Dark Eight, Asmodeus' cabal of pit fiend generals, although it's uncertain which of them would remain loyal to her and which would side with her father if a conflict did arise. Her relationship with her father is long and volatile. She frequently allies with his enemies and openly resists his attempts to control her. His decision to have her serve in his court left her bored and dissatisfied. It's possible that he believes the responsibility of ruling a layer of hell will curb her ambitions. Despite their differences, Glasya generally supports her father, as they share a similar outlook and approach to power. Glasya's mother, Bensozia, harbored deep resentment and saw her daughter as a vessel for this bitterness. Asmodeus had taken Bensozia as a consort, more as a trophy than a partner, and underestimated the depth of her loathing. Bensozia believed that Glasya could achieve what she could not, killing Asmodeus. She raised her daughter on a steady diet of hatred, teaching her the arts of seduction and intrigue, and filling her with a murderous ambition. His seed of hatred eventually grew into Glasya's overwhelming desire to displace her father. The Archduke Mephistopheles, despite his loud proclamations about replacing Asmodeus, could be considered something of a family member to Glasya, acting as a godfather figure to her. Most of the other Archdevils harbor a deep resentment towards her, suspecting her of playing a role in their downfalls during a period known as the Reckoning. Despite this animosity, they also fear her. Any move against her would be interpreted as a challenge to Asmodeus himself, as they speculate that he might be using her to further consolidate his power. It is difficult for them to discern who the true target of her ambitions might be. They struggle to infiltrate her court with spies, and Glasya aggressively recruits powerful servants who have been sidelined due to their own ambitions. High-ranking devils who have fallen out of favor with their lords are eager to plot against their former masters, much to the frustration of the other archdevils. Asmodeus allows this behavior, further intensifying their hatred towards her and forcing them to conspire to eliminate these former servants. Baldur and Moloch, both former rulers of Malbolge, harbor a particularly intense loathing for Glasya. Baldur, who had previously been the target of Glasya's attempt to supplant him as ruler of Maladomini, is the source of most of the assassins targeting her. His hatred stems from her role in the conspiracy that cost him the plane she now rules. Moloch, while pleased by the death of Malagard, is deeply irritated by Glasya's rule over his former dominion, viewing it as a blatant act of nepotism by Asmodeus. This pater, known for his cautious nature, became even more paranoid after Glasya killed the Hag Countess, suspecting that her father is complicit in the scheme. This drove him to take even more defensive measures. Glasya holds a particular grudge against Levistus, whom she has vowed to kill for an ancient crime involving the death of her mother. She is described as being obsessed with him, oscillating between deep sorrow and murderous rage. However, given Levistus's own defenses, her threats are often dismissed as mere posturing. After ascending to the position of Archduchess, Glasya utilized her network of Pylarions to gather intelligence on her nemesis, hoping to amass enough evidence to convince her father to allow her to destroy him once and for all. Despite this, Levistus still entertains the idea of reaching out to Asmodeus's rebellious daughter, potentially seeking to manipulate the situation to his advantage. The only Archduke who holds a favorable view of Glasya is Fierna, another daughter of an Archdevil, making her a likely ally for Glasya when the time comes to attack Levistus with her relatively weaker forces. Despite rumors that Glasya had killed Naomi, Fierna's mother, who was known to harbor a strong dislike for Glasya while she was alive, Fierna is infatuated with Glasya and can't stop praising her whenever the topic arises. The two have been friends even before Glasya's rise to power, and Fierna is inspired by her example. Glasya encouraged Fierna to build a network of devils and cultists independent of her father. Belial schemes cautiously to weaken Glasya's influence over his daughter, wary of provoking Asmodeus's ire. She had once been the consort of Mammon, though their true feelings for each other remain ambiguous. Mammon still harbors bitterness and a desire for revenge against her for manipulating him during the Reckoning, and he fears her newfound power. Despite this, he fantasizes about having her under his control if he ever comes to rule Hell. Glasya despised the squalid conditions of Mineros, Mammon's domain, but after taking control of Malbolge, she began manipulating some of his dukes in an attempt to seize his domain for herself. It's unclear whether Asmodeus assigned Glasya to Mammon, or she approached him on her own, either out of genuine passion or simply to create chaos among the Archdevils. Regardless, Asmodeus put an end to their relationship after the Reckoning. Rumors persist that the two have rekindled their affair since Glasya became an Archduchess, although others claim that Glasya resents Mammon for not fighting for their relationship. Given the complex nature of political romance in Hell, both rumors could very well be true. Glasya has few notable figures in her service, as most of Malbolge's original dukes and archdevils retreated to Maladomini, the true domain of Baldur, after Moloch's defeat. The death of Malagard did little to entice them back. Under Malagard's rule, no one was promoted to the rank of duke, and Glasya only accepts the most skilled of the Hag's former minions after they sufficiently grovel for her favor. Some of these minions have attempted to avenge their former master, and for their defiance, they are imprisoned in the upper reaches of the Tower of Pain, where they endure a variety of tortures. One such servant is Bloodcurdle, Malagard's favored nightmare, who feigns submission to Glasya before attempting to throw her into a lake of bile. One of the few remaining dukes in Glasya's service is Tartak, the former legate of Moloch, who abandoned Baldur to become Glasya's chief lieutenant and high marshal. Tartak is a master of intrigue, and for offering Glasya his wisdom and experience, she grants him significant power. Known for his reputation of disloyalty and a tendency to allow coups and poor decisions to unfold, Tartak's perspective has changed under Glasya's influence. He has come to genuinely believe in her potential to take over Hell, having been seduced by her during her visits to Balsabul's court. Glasya sees in Tartak a kindred spirit and an invaluable ally, and she grants him the recognition he has long craved. Despite the gifts and affection she bestows upon him, so far his ambitions remain unfulfilled. He doubts that Glasya would reward him by suggesting he replace another Archdevil, and thus has begun crafting his own plans to achieve that goal. Another key figure in Glasya's court is Beleth, the Prince of Imps. After a brief interrogation, Glasya quickly enlisted his services. Determined to establish her rule independently of her father's authority, he recognizes the value of Beleth's extensive spy network that spans multiple planes. He allows Beleth to work for other Archdevils, even though he serves as her spy master and saboteur. It is rumored that Beleth occasionally reports on Glasya's activities directly to Asmodeus, but that Glasya doesn't hold this against him. Although Beleth is expected to provide Glasya with any information relevant to her, he feels no obligation to share information that isn't immediately important or that he has obtained through dealings with mortals. Glasya's fortress, Osea, is equipped with special chambers that allow for devils of any type to reside there comfortably, although she does have a clear preference for certain kinds of devils. The nobles of her court, including the beautiful Erinyes and the corrupting Pylarions, enjoy her particular favoritism. Succubi are also part of this inner circle. Her palace is guarded by elite forces, including war devils, and filled with various other servants, both devils and other beings, all eager to serve, willing to die to protect her. Among her servants, the most rebellious and troublesome are the Kalabons. These putrid creatures are believed to have originated from the corpse of the Hag Countess and harbor a deep-seated hatred for Glasya, and sometimes attack her and her subordinates. Despite Glasya's relatively limited personal power, the number of cults devoted to her is vast. She had a large following of mortals even before her rise to Archdevil status, and her following has now grown to rival those of the most worshipped lords in Hell. Ironically, even though she is the daughter of a being who personifies law, much of Glasya's appeal stems from her embodiment of rebellion against oppression. As a dissenter within an aristocracy, she is both an outsider and someone born into the system, yet she has managed to overcome every obstacle placed before her. Her cults thrive in civilized places where order and tradition are deeply entrenched because she offers a path to the persecuted, exploited, and downtrodden, her most passionate followers, as well as those who feel trapped by societal or familial expectations. She allows them to defy rules and even rise above them. Glasya is particularly drawn to mortals who dare to challenge overwhelming odds with bold plans, and in some cases, she even grants them her respect and patronage. Asmodeus, in part to burden Glasya with additional responsibilities, decreed that she must capture mortal souls through deals and legalities, ensuring that fulfilling her cultist desires doesn't violate any legal precedents. Her followers seek power, wealth, or love, but want to achieve these without breaking the rules. To this end, Glasya and her agents provide guidance on how to manipulate and navigate the law using technicalities and loopholes. Glasya is a master at exploiting the law for her own benefit and aids others in turning the system against itself to gain more power. Her followers often congregate in regions experiencing political turmoil, where nations teeter on the edge of adopting lawful evil as their governing principle. In exchange for their souls, her agents also scrutinize contracts made with other devils, searching for loopholes and ways to nullify them. While thieves and criminals are naturally drawn to Glasya, corrupt nobility, in particular, fall under her influence. She becomes the patron of those seeking power that is both absolute and legitimate, both in legal and cultural terms, such as ambitious royals who ascend to power following the untimely demise of their parents. Gangs of criminal Kenku and goblins plotting to overthrow their hobgoblin masters also make pacts with Glasya. She grants her followers various abilities, including the power to move through the shadows for short periods, enhance their thieving skills, siphon energy from others, and teleport to escape danger, though the latter ability inflicts excruciating pain on those who use it. She has a particular interest in societies where traditional gender roles are prominent, and her cults often target women close to powerful men, mothers, daughters, and romantic partners, teaching them how to wield influence from behind the throne. The influence promised by Asmodeus' daughter is intended to strengthen family ties, but Glasya's interpretation of this promise is quite flexible. The gifts she offers can just as easily sever bonds as they can reinforce them. Many of her followers are young adults, often inexperienced and naive, yet full of energy and willingness to experiment with new ideas. After transforming Malbolge, Glasya cultivated a small cult following as a minor patron of corruption, growth, and agony. Her cultists are able to draw power from the quivering remnants of the Hag Countess, backing themselves with her essence. This gruesome power has allowed them to develop horrific mutations to enhance themselves, such as having throbbing tumors emerge from their wounds to heal them, extend their reach, or increase their speed. Their corrupted flesh can also spew streams of vile filth at others. Cults devoted to the seductive Glasya often operate brothels as a front for their temples. Their clerics favor the scourge as their weapon of choice, a nod to the previous ruler of Malbolge, Moloch. They also have access to potent acids and poisons derived from the bile lakes of her realm. Instead of summoning the grotesque lemurs, Glasya's clerics can call upon the more dangerous Kalabons, using them as living weapons to corrupt peaceful forests. Additionally, they can summon the corrupting Pylarions. Some are even known to incorporate dark, primal spirits into their rituals. Kalabons are devils originating from Malbolge. They are remnants of Malagard. In their desperation to survive, they tore themselves away from Malagard. Although they strive to rebuild the Hag Countess, Glasya has enslaved them, forcing them to wait until they can one day reunite and recreate their former self. They appear as heaps of flesh, continuously leaking blood and pus, and move about on 3 legs. Most are small in stature. These creatures endure constant, maddening pain, haunted by the echoes and psychic screams of Malagard's death. This agony often drives them to collapse in pitiful weeping. Despite this, they harbor a deep hatred for all beings and will kill any creature they encounter unless Glasya commands otherwise. They spend much of their time either attacking non-Kalabons or mourning the loss of Malagard, often finding solace in forming large, tumor-like piles with one another. A Kalabon can utilize an acid tentacle and its overpowering stench against their enemies. When in the presence of other Kalabons, has the ability to merge with them, forming a larger colony and consequently a more formidable creature. In battle, they often let out a shriek to summon others of their kind before overwhelming their enemies by swarming them. They are close to being defeated, they break down into their individual parts to try to escape, saving as many members of their colony as possible. They reproduce after consuming a sufficient amount of food, at which point the Kalabon bursts and splits into 2 new beings. They emerge from Malagard's corpse after her death, becoming semi-independent entities. However, as the last remnants of Malagard vanished, they turned to feeding on one another, which led to their numbers dwindling. It is rumored that the more they consume each other, the fainter the mental screams of the Hag Countess have become, and the more they are able to resist Glasya's commands. Perhaps more unsettling is the fact that some Kalabons have begun to take on a female humanoid form with purplish skin and a mane of white feelers, a form that some claim bears a resemblance to the Hag Countess. Glasya sends out aspects to personally corrupt mortals or further her plans in other ways. Although few in number, these aspects can easily blend into any society, preferring the luxuries of the material plane over the unpleasantness of their home in Malbolge. Glasya was active in Faerun long before becoming an archduchess, having previously targeted Raven's Bluff for corruption. Since she can no longer visit the material plane herself, her aspects appear more frequently, focusing on corrupting individuals, especially those of great virtue, and fostering new cults to increase her influence. Like all devils, Glasya seeks mortal souls, which hold significant power. Each archdevil extracts different benefits from their souls. Mephistopheles, for instance, uses them to create hellfire. However, what Glasya specifically desires from souls remains unclear. Most of Malbolge's soul shells are driven into pits filled with wriggling worms that devour them before their tattered remains crawl out as lemurs. Once this gruesome transformation is complete, the pain devils overseeing the process simply send them off to wander Malbolge. Glasya uses the souls that had been enslaved to Malagard as subjects for her twisted experiments in beauty and hideousness. In her early days before her rise to power, Glasya was known for flitting between the courts of various archdevils on whim, causing mischief wherever she went. This period of carefree troublemaking came to an abrupt end with the mysterious death of her mother, Bensosia. The details of what transpired remain cloaked in conspiracy, but the outcome was clear. Levistus was sealed in his icy prison, and Glasya became the consort of Mammon. The events surrounding her mother's death deepened the hatred that Ben-Sozia had planted in her daughter's heart toward Asmodeus, and it was during this time that Glasya's dedication to supplanting her father took root. As Mammon's consort, Glasya found herself in a less advantageous position. Mammon was a lesser archdevil, self-indulgent and cowardly, offering her few opportunities to rise in status, except her manipulating others to do her own bidding. The archdevils who stood in her way were too powerful to confront directly, and they were wary of making any moves against Asmodeus that could jeopardize their own domains or disrupt Hell's precarious balance of power. Glasya recognized that this fragile peace was so unstable that only a few key strategic manipulations could unravel the whole thing. She exploited the bitterness of Mammon's seneschal and her bodyguard Fogalor, who harbored deep resentment toward his master for being foolish and lazy, leaving the real work to him. Fogalor was not only a powerful bodyguard, but also a valuable source of political intelligence, and was persuaded by Glasya to convince Mammon that Baldur was planning to attack his ally Mephistopheles. While Mammon wrestled with this information and debated whether to inform him, Glasya took the opportunity to visit Moloch's court, where she recruited his consort Malagard. However, she wasn't alone in this endeavor. Malagard was also conspiring with Geryon, the lord of Stygia and Moloch's archenemy, while ambitious devils like Beleth and Tartok joined the scheme independently. These maneuvers set the stage for the power plays that would eventually lead to Glasya's rise, all while sowing the seeds of discord among the other archdevils. Through her influence over Malagard, Glasya was able to manipulate Moloch into believing that Mephistopheles was planning to attack him. This led Moloch to inform Baldur of the supposed threat. In response, he began amassing his armies, which in turn confirmed the misinformation that Mammon had already passed on to Mephistopheles. With additional subtle manipulations, Glasya pushed the archdevils closer to war rather than mere posturing, possibly involving the assassination of Fierna's more level-headed mother. As a result, Hell's armies mobilized, and the reckoning began. However, Asmodeus was not oblivious to the schemes of his archdukes. Geryon, acting as Asmodeus' agent during the reckoning, was positioned to intervene at the critical moment. Just as the two factions led by Baldur and Mephistopheles were about to engage in their final decisive battle, Geryon sounded his horn, signaling the Pit Fiend leaders to turn against their masters, effectively bringing the conflict to an abrupt end. As a consequence of the reckoning, Glasya was forbidden from continuing her relationship with Mammon and was given a stern directive. If she wished to maintain her prestigious position, she would need to take on actual responsibilities. This marked a turning point for Glasya, forcing her transition from a life of manipulation and intrigue to one where she had to actively govern and solidify her own power base within the Nine Hells. Asmodeus dubbed Glasya the Queen of the Arenyes, a title that initially caused her to throw a fit. This new role brought her under the scrutiny of the Dark Eight, a powerful group that either formed or rose to greater prominence around this time and was responsible for managing the Arenyes. Despite the lack of privacy that came from their watchful eyes, Glasya quickly found that her new position had many unexpected benefits. She enjoyed her duties, often spying on Arenyes while polymorphed to ensure that they were performing their tasks correctly, and relished in the freedom to personally visit the material plane whenever she desired. The influence of the Dark Eight also provided her with protection, as the other archdevils were hesitant to move against her for fear of provoking the wrath of this influential group. During this period, Glasya used her diplomatic skills to quietly amass a small army, preparing for the possibility of a military coup in one of the layers of Hell. At one point, Glasya established the first organized crime syndicate in the Nine Hells, known as her Coin Legions, to increase her power and wealth. This syndicate operated similarly to a thieves' guild on the material plane, with the added advantage of Glasya's deep understanding of Baator's laws. Many devils in Baator unwittingly adhere to tradition-like laws, even though only the actual laws carry penalties for non-compliance. Glasya was able to exploit this by having her followers purchase souls in Mineros using counterfeit coins she created by transmuting lead into gold. The law on minting coins specified the material used before processing, so her counterfeit coins initially passed as legitimate currency. Although these coins eventually reverted to their base metal, by that time, the souls and other resources had already been acquired and resold at a substantial profit. The timeline of these events in relation to Malagard's death in 1375 is uncertain, but sometime after her criminal activities, Glasya arrived to claim the sixth layer of Hell as her own. Malagard's most loyal servants were either crushed or fell to their deaths during the horrific process in which she fused with her domain, and the survivors had to claw their way out of the collapsed earth. Glasya wasted no time in claiming the layer, Her forces swept the land unchallenged as she made her grand entrance, riding into her new realm on a luxurious canopy with silken pillows held aloft by winged imps. When her authority was questioned, she produced a letter from her father Asmodeus, declaring his support and officially naming her the Archduchess of Malbolge. Even if the other Archdevils had been willing to risk attacking Asmodeus's daughter, they were deterred by the fact that the Dark Eight now had dominion over much of Hell's military. The risk of triggering another reckoning was too great, allowing Glasya to secure her birthright and ascend to the rank as Lord of the Sixth. Almost everything known about Glasya is shrouded in rumor and speculation. Despite the relentless efforts of spies and enemies from all sides, she maintained a veil of secrecy throughout her rise to power, and became even more enigmatic after ascending to the position of Archduchess. Her past actions are the subject of much debate, and her discretion only fuels the rumors and gossip about her future intentions. One of the most widely believed stories is that Levistus was responsible for the death of Glasya's mother, Bensozia. According to this tale, the treacherous Archduke approached Bensozia while she was inspecting Stygia, believing that she had knowledge of his weaknesses. When she rejected his offer of partnership, Levistus killed her in retaliation, and Asmodeus responded by sealing Levistus in his icy tomb. But there is another version of this story that suggests a much darker twist. Bensozia was allegedly undermining Asmodeus, secretly feeding information to Levistus to give him every possible advantage. This clandestine affair lasted for a while, with Levistus eventually deciding to take his treachery further by attempting to seduce Glasya as well. Levistus was fully aware of the risks involved. He knew that Glasya, being young and headstrong, might react with violent jealousy if she ever discovered the truth, and Bensozia would likely be enraged as well. Nevertheless, the scoundrel continued his deception for as long as possible. Eventually, Glasya uncovered the truth. After a heated confrontation with her father, she fled to Levistus, intending to become his open consort, only to find her mother already there. Although Bensozia had nurtured Glasya's hatred towards Asmodeus, that hatred extended to her mother as well. According to this version of events, Glasya killed her mother before she could return to Nessus. As the story goes, Asmodeus's constable, Martinet, discovered the parricide, and in an effort to prevent Asmodeus from appearing incompetent, killed all witnesses, framed Levistus for the murder, and convinced Asmodeus to place Glasya in Mammon's court. This version of events, much like the rest of Glasya's history, is cloaked in uncertainty. After Malagard's demise, Malbolge transformed into a realm of twisted growth and unsettling decay, tainted by the essence of the Hag Countess's decomposing body. The entire layer teemed with grotesque, swollen life, while those who perished on its corrupted soil were absorbed in a grotesque manner to sustain the land. Anyone in contact with its physical elements, be it vegetation, structures, or water, risked being ensnared by tendrils that drained their flesh with blood, replacing it with Malbolge's malevolent essence. Without immediate healing magic, the victims succumbed, their bodies and souls ensnared within the layer, tormented by unimaginable pain. Glasya, however, did not allow Malbolge to remain in this horrifying state. He repurposed the decaying remains of the Hag Countess to reshape Malbolge, crafting it into a beautiful garden reminiscent of its ancient past. Yet this garden, aligned with Glasya's twisted vision, reflects her corrupted spirit. Just as Glasya herself is both alluring and vile, Malbolge became a place of striking beauty intertwined with horrific ugliness, a domain that simultaneously repels and entices with its corruption. It evolved into a realm of illusion and deception, appearing fair at first glance, but unable to fully mask the underlying decay, despair, and danger that lie beneath the surface. Its beauty was only skin deep, betrayed by the faint scent of rot that lingered in the air. The autumnal trees were brown and gnarled, their roots grasping, and the fruits they bear were prone to bursting, dousing those below with caustic fluids. The once lovely fields were home to fragrant but bloated and oozing flowers, whose scent induced a drug-filled sleep filled with nightmares. The shimmering ponds and rivers became pools of poison, and even the rocks started crumbling to dust. Amid the dead forests and meadows lay the civilizations of Malbolge, mirroring the corruption of its environment. The landscape was scattered with ruined palaces and abandoned pavilions. The once beautiful white cities and towers had become charnel houses, their battlements adorned with impaled corpses. Glasya's capital, opulently furnished with Hell's most exquisite treasures, was constructed from the skull and bones of the Hag Countess. Many of her minions reside within the innards of this grotesque city, where they hunt the damned souls and even other devils, including Glasya's own servants, for sport. Moloch, after his earlier defeat, found a way back into the Nine Hells by aligning himself with the outcast nobles of Avernus, plotting to seize control of all of Baator. His last known appearance in the corrupted Malbolge involved his imprisonment beneath the fortress Slag, possibly enduring the same fate as his former gold-coated victims. Malbolge's landscape masked much of what once existed, but it merely hid what lay beneath. While Glasya's influence and magic transformed the surface, the original environment persisted below. Beneath the writhing grass and toxic nettles were towering monolithic shards, and under the soft soil and tangled roots, tunnels formed by jagged boulders remained. A significant feature of this realm were the Kalabons, fragments of Malagard's flesh that still held pieces of her memory. Tormented and trapped in their state, they ripped themselves free from the landscape, seeking others like them in an attempt to reconstruct the Countess. However, Glasya prevented them from achieving this goal, leaving them in perpetual agony, awaiting the day they could finally restore Malagard to her former self. Whether they ultimately failed or succeeded, and despite Glasya's efforts to prolong the suffering of what remained of the hag, Malbolge would not remain on the verge of decay indefinitely. By the late 15th century, it was known to have reverted to its original mountainous, boulder-strewn state. Important sites in Malbolge include the birthing pits, vile stagnant pools found within swollen mounds where most of the damned are herded. Pain devils relentlessly drive them into noxious liquid swarming with writhing maggots and snapping, toothless mouths. Hours later, lemurs emerge, slithering down the hillside before being forked away by excruciating attendants to wander the lair aimlessly. While many of these pits are concealed by forests, the most infamous one is situated at the center of the lair. Glasya's Citadel is the unnamed fortress of the Archduchess, which was established after Malbolge reverted to its mountainous form, and it stands on sturdy yet seemingly fractured and unstable pillars and buttresses. Beneath it lies a maze lined with cells and torture chambers, where those who incur Glasya's wrath are imprisoned and tormented. The Garden of Delights is a walled garden in the heart of Oseia, and is hidden behind tan walls made of bleached skulls. It is an expansive and stunning area filled with plants from across the plains. The scents of vibrant flowers and the whispers of succubi calm visitors, easing their fears. No creatures lie in wait to attack. No plants are dangerous traps. This oasis of true beauty in a harsh land of deception provides a brief moment of respite and refuge in hell. It serves to lull Malbolge's victims into a false sense of security, making the inevitable loss of its comforts all the more agonizing. The Hair Forest, also called the Forest of Sighs, is a thick, twisted woodland made up of the black, scaly, oozing hairs of the former Hag Countess, rooted in flaky, white soil. Glasya uses this forest to conceal her treasures and oubliettes, where prisoners are left to languish in isolation. When she tires of her captives, they are impaled on the branches and left to decay for decades. It is believed that the trees keep these victims alive by supplying them with nutrients while slowly consuming their souls. The hag's innards consist of a narrow network of twisted passageways formed by Malagard's intestines. Her decaying mass extends beneath Malbolge, appearing fleshy but with the strength of stone. Non-devils within these intestinal corridors are treated like undigested matter and are periodically subjected to sprays of acid, while the rooms, carved from maggot-infested earth, resemble more typical chambers. Lakes of bile are a series of vile pools that produce potent poisons which Glasya's forces bottle and sell to interested parties across the plains. Toxic fumes rise from these lakes, often blending with unpredictable effects. The entire area is steeped in ambient toxicity, making it perilous for mortals, while devils not already immune to poisons gradually become resistant to their effects. Magoth Thig is a cavern with walls that emit a grayish, mind-dulling light. The entrance to this obscure crevice is often blocked by the falling boulders of Malbolge, yet it mysteriously reopens each time. Devils sent to explore the cavern never return, and at times terrifying cries echo from its depths, unheard by the petitioners, but distinctly audible and deeply unsettling to the resident devils. Oseia, Glasya's fortress palace, is a gleaming white structure lavishly adorned with Baroque details. While it appears to be made of stone, a closer look reveals that it is actually the enlarged, distorted skull of Malagard, fused with the lacquered bones of countless victims, including the devils who displeased her. This palace stands beyond the edge of the Hair Forest, atop a rounded hill surrounded by perfumed gardens. The building is decorated with erotic statues, unnerving sculptures, and poisonous plants, all accompanied by haunting music. Beneath the luxurious and well-guarded playrooms lies a long tubular corridor resembling a giant throat. The walls still move as if an immense creature continues to breathe. Slag, the final fortress, is the last of Malbolge's great bronze fortresses from previous administrations. This half-melted structure contains galleries displaying the preserved remains of hundreds of creatures dipped in molten gold and set in niches, allowing Moloch to forever gaze upon their twisted expressions during their final moments of agony. Glasya allowed this fortress to remain as a reminder of what came before and what she has surpassed. Glasya's rise to her current status has long been a topic of speculation and intrigue. The bizarre death of the Hag Countess Malagard left many wondering what mysterious force was behind it. Some claim that Glasya was directly responsible, with her death being a brutal and shocking display of Glasya's power. Others suggest that Malagard's demise was partly self-inflicted. She had spent years amassing souls for a ritual intended to elevate her to godhood, but something went horribly wrong during the process. The ritual itself might have been flawed. She might have attempted to abort it, or perhaps Geryon interfered, leading to her downfall. There are also theories that Asmodeus, the overlord of the Hells, played a role in her death. While Asmodeus possesses the power to alter the forms of Archdevils as he sees fit, it's unclear whether he can outright kill them. Some question whether Malagard ever truly died, or if her fate was something more complex. Even if Asmodeus didn't directly kill her, there's speculation about whether he had pre-planned her demise. He had explicitly given Glasya permission to rule Malbolge, but whether this approval was part of a prior arrangement after resolving their past grievances, or granted after Glasya's invasion, remains uncertain. Some theories suggest that Asmodeus' plans for Glasya's rise might have been set in motion as far back as the Reckoning. According to this theory, Asmodeus elevated the treacherous Levistus over Geryon to keep the former lord's power in check without directly empowering the Frozen Prince. The Hag Countess in this view was merely a placeholder, a temporary archdevil meant to oversee Malbolge until Asmodeus and Glasya reached an understanding, or perhaps until Glasya was ready to claim the realm for herself. These theories only add to the enigma surrounding Glasya's ascent to power, leaving much about her rise and the true nature of her relationship with Asmodeus open to interpretation and debate. Glasya's relationship with Asmodeus is indeed one of the most enigmatic and complex of her story, with the terms father and daughter failing to fully capture the intricate connection between these two immortal beings of order and wickedness. The question of why Asmodeus would choose to have a child at all has remained a subject of speculation. One theory suggests that Asmodeus, despite being the ruler of Hell, is as much a prisoner within it as he is its master. Surrounded by other godlike entities filled with animosity towards him, he might have created Glasya in the hope that she could serve as a proxy on other planes, extending his influence beyond the confines of Hell. Some sages even speculate that Glasya may not be his biological daughter at all, but rather an entity of immense power and unknown origin that Asmodeus adopted as his own for reasons known only to him. His decision to place Glasya in charge of Malbolge and his ultimate intentions for her after she solidifies her rule remains a mystery. The extent to which Glasya can be said to be under the control of her father is also an open question. In the past, Asmodeus had presented her to the other Archdevils as his daughter and had her patrol the 9 Hells on his behalf, yet she often surprised him with schemes of her own design. There is speculation that Glasya, like Geryon, might have been acting as Asmodeus' agent during the Reckoning, tasked with exposing the other Archdevils, or she could have been pursuing her own agenda, attempting to destabilize Hell for her own gain. Asmodeus, renowned for his supreme intelligence, often gives the impression of being several steps ahead of everyone else, even when events don't unfold exactly as he planned them. It's possible that Glasya's actions were anticipated and even desired by the King of Hell, with her rebellion, scheming, and quest for power being part of a larger plan he set in motion long ago. Alternatively, Glasya may have outwitted her father, proving herself to be a cunning and subversive force capable of defying his control and carving out her own path to power. If she did indeed manage to deceive him, Asmodeus might view her success either as an unforeseen advantage or as a mark of shame. Ultimately, the true nature of their relationship and the motivations behind their actions are likely known only to Asmodeus and Glasya themselves, leaving the rest of Hell and the multiverse wondering about the nature of their connection and their plans.
I started out so strong, with dreams of reaching high, but the ground just keeps on shifting, and I can't touch the sky. Every step I take, I slide further down. It's just like Malbolge, the devil's playground. Oh, just like Malbolge, I'm slipping down the line. Ain't no solid ground, I just fall every time. In Baator's dark pit, where the earth won't hold, my life keeps on tilting, and I can't find my soul. Met a lady so fine, she had the devil's grin. Her hair was like fire, her eyes were pulling me in. She promised me power, but only led to despair. Now I'm falling faster, and she don't even care. Oh, just like Malbolge, I'm slipping down the line. Ain't no solid ground, I just fall every time. In Baator's dark pit, where the earth won't hold, life keeps on tilting, and I can't find my soul. The path keeps on twisting, the rocks won't stay. I'm losing my grip as I slide away. She's laughing at me with her heart made of stone. In that she-devil's clutches, I'm all alone. Oh, just like Malbolge, I'm slipping down the line. Ain't no solid ground, I just fall every time. In Baator's dark pit, where the earth won't hold, my life keeps on tilting, and I can't find my soul. I'm stuck in this place where the devils play. No way to stand still, just slipping away. Down in Malbolge, my hope is all gone. Down that sloping road, I keep slipping on.